Some of the harshest critics of foreign-made tools have expressed shock over something that might just have changed everything that we thought we knew about low-cost imported tools. What just happened is really a big deal, not just for the tool industry, but for every woodworker, including those who hate hand planes, but are now changing their mind completely. And this is what changed it for them. But this is even bigger than hand planes. Let me explain. Several well-known hand tool experts have spoken both publicly and off the record recently about new tools coming from the other side of the world that have been getting better and better in quality in recent years. One quote that really stood out to me was, "What's going to happen when the planes from the Far East function just as well as North American tools made from Veritas and Lie-Nielsen?" It's a fair question, because for decades we've seen a lot of garbage coming from overseas. And this has really harmed our craft in ways that I don't think most people even realize. As I said, this applies to a lot of tools, but for the sake of this discussion, we're going to focus on the hand plane. Imagine picking up one of these for the first time. You try it, but it skips and it tears the wood fibers. It leaves lines on the surface. The mouth around the blade clogs up, and you ask yourself why on earth you would deal with all this hassle when you could just grab a power sander or some other tool. So that's what you do. You toss the plane aside, and you never give any plane another chance. Now imagine having the opposite experience. You pick up a plane, and it works almost right out of the box with little to no tuning or fussing around. It shaves wood effortlessly. The cuts are finer than you can get from any power saw. The surface left behind is smoother than you'd achieve with any sandpaper. Instead of dust and noise that normally fills your shop, you discover a deeply satisfying and relaxing experience which makes your shop time much more enjoyable. That's the difference between a good premium quality tool and the junk that has been coming onto the market in the last several decades. I get why so many folks hate hand planes. All they've ever experienced is the junk. And it isn't because good tools aren't out there, but it's because they're typically way more expensive than the average woodworker is willing to pay. Take, for example, this Lie-Nielsen No. 4 smoothing plane. There is no doubt this is a high quality tool. If you've ever tried a good plane, this would blow your mind. You'd rethink sandpaper forever. That is, if you could afford the near $400 price tag for this. Most woodworkers simply aren't going to pay that. So they try the cheaper, crappier versions, thinking it's the same thing, and then they just get turned off from planes entirely, having never experienced the difference that a high quality tool can make in their work. So that brings us back to the questions being asked by these experts these days. What happens when Lie-Nielsen or other high-end, high-priced manufacturers lose their spots as king of the hill because planes from the Far East are getting better and better for a fraction of the price? The tipping point may have arrived. This No. 4 smoothing plane from Taylor Toolworks, which is a Missouri-based company that I've worked with for years, as most of my viewers know, it's nearly identical to the Lie-Nielsen plane. But instead of an out-of-reach price tag of $375, this one is $119, 70% less money. That is a big deal, and that's why it's got a lot of hand tool experts talking. So let's look at both planes more closely to see how they really compare and what this means for folks looking to save money by buying tools from the Far East. There's a reason they both look very similar. These are both patterned after Stanley's old Bedrock design, which they made between 1898 and 1943. Bedrocks were Stanley's high-end planes. Even today, that's considered one of the best plane designs ever. But manufacturing Bedrock-style planes is a lot more difficult than it is to manufacture typical planes. So the fact that Tay Tools patterned theirs after that premium Bedrock design is a big deal in itself. Now, it's worth noting that not all Tay Tools planes on their website are Bedrocks. They sell standard planes too, so don't confuse the two of them. I'm talking about the planes that have Bedrock style in the title. One of the most notable features of the Bedrock pattern are the heavier castings and the high sides. You can see the difference compared to a typical Stanley plane. Note how much thicker the Tay Tools version is and how the sides have more surface area. These larger sides are better for a few reasons, but one of the most useful features is the ability to use the plane on its side, like with a shooting board, to precisely trim workpieces and fine-tune cuts. This requires precise machining so that the sides are perfectly square to the sole. You can see this is not the case with my regular Stanley. The Lie-Nielsen is perfectly square, as you'd expect from a high-end plane, but so is the Tay-Tools version. That takes a lot of extra machining and care, which most manufacturers simply don't want to invest in. That alone is a sign of real quality. Now, incidentally, both of these plane bodies are made from ductile iron. That's far superior to typical cast iron planes. It's more stable, so the plane is going to keep its flatness and its squareness. It's more rigid, so it doesn't flex during heavy use. And it's more durable. It's more able to survive drops that would destroy most planes. Another thing that typically stands out on premium planes is the quality of the blade. Now, of course, on a hand plane, we call that an iron, but I'm just going to stick with blade for this video so I don't get any confusion. To function properly, the back of the blade must be perfectly flat, and that's rarely the case with inexpensive planes. It's one of the reasons new users just get frustrated and quit. Only the highest quality planes come with blades that are lapped flat right out of the box. And both of these planes did, despite the huge difference in price. Now, as with any new plane, both of these did require routine edge honing to use. They're both modern cryogenically hardened tool steel. The Tay-Tools version is 01 with a hardness of 54 to 58. The Lie-Nielsen is A2 with a hardness of 60 to 62. So both are premium tool steels that will stay sharp a long time, but the Tay-Tool version is slightly easier to sharpen because it's just a little bit softer. Both blades are also extra thick. Here you see the Tay-Tools blade compared to a standard Stanley blade. That extra thickness reduces vibration to produce a smoother surface, another sign of quality. The chip breakers on both planes are extra thick as well, much more robust than the Stanley ones. In fact, while most manufacturers bend their chip breakers from flat steel, both the Lie-Nielsen and the Tay-Tool version are machined. This makes the shape more consistent, so it produces even pressure near the cutting edge of the blade. If you've ever had a plane that easily gets clogged with chips, likely a big part of that problem is the chip breaker doesn't properly mate with the blade. That plagues cheaply made planes. I also noted that the surface where the plane blades rest, which is called the frog, is well ground on both these models. In fact, they aren't machined like the Stanley one, which shows mill marks. The frog on the two premium planes has been ground flat. That's an extra step that produces a nearly seamless mate between it and the blade. When you go the extra mile to properly treat all the mating surfaces between the components of the plane, you get a tool that functions almost like a solid piece of steel with no unwanted movement or chatter during use. Cheap planes neglect these steps so that they can save money, but the quality of their cuts often suffer because of it. Of course, the proof is in the planing, right? And both these planes performed equally well. I'm taking shaving so thin that the static causes them to stick to my fingers. I could have gotten these even thinner and more consistent if I'd honed the blade more. I usually stop around 5,000 grit, while folks who love the look of those wispy shavings go all the way up to 20 or 30,000. Shavings like this aren't necessary for woodworking, but they are a sign of a fine quality tool because you simply can't get them with a crappy plane. So if they function the same, with the same results, why is one $250 more than the other? There are some differences. While the fit and finish of the Tay-Tools plane is excellent, far nicer than I would expect from a $119 plane, Lie-Nielsen gives you some extra cosmetic refinements for that $250 price jump. Look at the underside of the lever caps, for example. There are some rough spots in the Tay-Tools version, which won't affect its performance, but the Lie-Nielsen version is nicer. The chamfered screw head on the Lie-Nielsen is a nice touch too, as is the brass or bronze frog and cap iron. The edges of the Lie-Nielsen's castings are also a little more refined, a bit smoother to the touch. Again, these are all cosmetic differences. The only real functional difference I found between the two was the depth adjustment. The knob turns one way to increase the cut and the other way to decrease it. And like most planes, you have to give the Tay-Tools one a couple extra spins before it engages from one direction to the other. This is caused by all the moving parts in the mechanism, from the threads to the yoke to the little pivot pin to the tab that goes up through the iron. Virtually every plane sold in the last 175 years is like this, and it has no effect on the plane's performance. However, The Lee-Nielsen plane requires only about a quarter turn to switch between advancing the blade and retracting it. I have to give them a lot of credit for that. It takes a tremendous level of precision to eliminate so much of the backlash. It is impressive. Are these differences enough to justify the extra $250? I don't think so. In fact, the bulk of this tremendous price disparity has very little to do with quality or performance. The difference is in where they're made. The Lee-Nielsen plane is made in Maine, while the Tay Tools one is made in India. And this is what's shocking so many tool experts. We just haven't seen tools this good coming out of the Far East that much in the past. They have tried making planes, but most of them have just been junk. But things are changing. You can't just dismiss tools based upon where they're made anymore, not as far as quality is concerned. I do understand that some folks just want to buy more locally. I myself like to support small businesses wherever they are. And Tay Tools is a small business based in Missouri. I've also met Mike Taylor several times, and I support his efforts to find good tools that folks can actually afford while providing a livelihood for those in his local community. Regardless, the use of hand planes can be one of the most enjoyable parts of woodworking. They can do things power tools just can't do without the dust and the noise and the danger and even the mistakes. Forget about what you've heard from others. Forget about your own past experiences with old and poorly made planes. You owe it to yourself to try a high quality plane that will work well and be a pleasure to use just once in your life. If you want to check this one out, I'll link to it below. Be sure to use that link because, as I said, Tay Tools has other planes that aren't as robust as the premium Bedrock line. Try just one. It'll change how you work.